Okay, so we discussed the 10 sfirot, the 10 divine attributes, 7 divine attributes. It was 10. We discussed 7 of the 10. Today we're going to move on to another subject, which is related to the previous subject, and it's a very all-encompassing topic in the Kabbalah. It's called the world of chaos and the world of order, or the breaking of the vessels. You can call it what you want. And it is a very important Kabbalistic doctrine. It's important because it is critical to understand our universe. It's also important to understand ourselves because, again, our soul is a reflection of the divine energies that create the world. But it's also important to understand our purpose of creation and what we're trying to do in life on this planet. So it's important to understand, again, philosophically or Kabbalistically, the energies that are present within the world, the energies that are present within ourselves, but it's also a call to action to figure out what to do and how to live our life. So this is a very big topic. I think we'll do it in twice, today and tomorrow, and hopefully today we can give a little bit about the Kabbalistic history and the spiritual side of things, as well as how they reflect in the soul. And tomorrow we'll focus a little bit more about how that affects our day-to-day life. So just we talked about this often. Of course, if we study Hasidic philosophy or Kabbalah, this topic comes up quite often. But hopefully today we can give sort of a more of a comprehensive overview. So we discussed last week we discussed the 10 attributes, the 7 attributes, but they're part of 10. We'll call them 10 attributes. What are the attributes? They're sfirot, meaning to say you have infinity. God is infinite. How does God create a finite world from infinity? That is sort of a leap from infinity to finite. So the answer is that God first emanates from himself 10 expressions. Those expressions are finite, right? Kindness, severity, wisdom, understanding, all these expressions are finite energies. And then once you have 10 finite energies, you can start building the universe, which is a finite entity. Okay, beautiful. The problem is that, not the problem, between the infinite and the finite is one more step. In other words, when we talk about the 10 sfirot, the 10 divine attributes, we're usually talking about the 10 sfirot as they are in the world of order, as we will explain. But preceding the 10 sfirot of the world of order, there is a world of chaos. And we want to talk a little bit about the world of chaos and how it's reflected within ourselves, because we also have the world of chaos within ourselves. And then we want to talk about how that affects the universe at large. So in short, the story is as follows. We mentioned it, I think, on Sunday. In short, the story is as follows. God, the first round, when God projects the 10 energies, the sfirot, the energies are super powerful, and they cannot be contained with a vessel, in vessels. Now, just take a moment just to talk about vessels for a second. Everything you know, from the Kabbalistic perspective, anything you could think of, there is the light and the vessel. Another way of saying it is the energy and the form, right? Anything you can think about. Let's just take kindness, okay? You're kind to me, so you buy me a coffee, okay? So what's the light and what's the vessel? The light is the feeling. The light is the energy. The vessel is the cup of coffee. Okay, you have an idea, so you write a book. Okay, so what's the vessel? Well, the paper is the vessel. The ink is the vessel. But you can go even farther. The words are a vessel. Even the plot is the vessel. And what's the light? The light is the energy, that the idea, the core idea that you're trying to convey through the plot. Okay, so anything you think about in this earth, there will always be what the Kabbalah calls the or, the light, and the keli, and the vessel. And hopefully the light and the vessel are in sync. In other words, they fit each other, because hopefully the vessel conveys the idea. Sometimes a person has a great idea, but he can't find the words to express it, right? The artist is very frustrated. Why is the artist so frustrated? Because the artist has an idea, that's the light, but the artist struggles to find the proper vessel to express this idea. So in other words, there's always a tension between the light and the vessel. And when God emanates the 10 sefirot, again, at first the light is very powerful. The vessels are not strong enough. In the language of the Kabbalah, what that causes a breaking of the vessels. Breaking of the vessels means the vessels cannot contain what the light, and therefore the light, and therefore the vessels shatter, and the light sort of goes back to its source. And what do you end with? You end with chaos. As we discussed in the second verse of the Torah, the earth was tohu vavohu, chaotic and empty. Okay, that's the chaos. Then take two. God says, well, the first try didn't work, so we'll try again. This time he dims the light, so there's less light. If there's less light and the vessels are more powerful, less light, vessels more powerful, now we have order, now we can create the world. Now, make no mistake, it wasn't a mistake. The first time around wasn't a mistake. It was part of the process. You have to first have chaos before you have order, as we will discuss. So it wasn't that God didn't predict this. This is the way life happens. This is the way it happens. First is chaos, then there's order. So that is a Kabbalistic doctrine. And what this doctrine does for us, it does a few things. Probably, what I think is probably the most greatest ramification or philosophical ramification for this. There are many practical ramifications, but if we talk philosophically, why is this idea so important? Because this idea helps explain where the chaos and the negativity and the pain and the tragedy happens in this world, or even more general, the concept of unholiness. As we discussed many times, Judaism believes that Hashem is one. If Hashem is one, everything comes from Hashem. So the question is, if Hashem, the energy of God, which creates everything continuously, is holy and connected to its source and connected to God, how could there be phenomena in this earth that are negative and unholy and destructive, etc.? So the answer is, again, other religions say, well, the negativity comes from Satan, but we don't say that because we believe that everything comes from God. So the answer is that the negativity comes from God. However, it comes from a place of from the lights of chaos, which are very powerful. And again, they fell down very low. And when something breaks and falls, it is disconnected from its source. So the energy creating the evil in this world is indeed holy energy, but it's holy energy that fell and expresses itself in a destructive way. So and that's how it could at once it has both these contradictions. On one hand, it comes from holiness. All energy comes from holiness. On the other hand, the way it's expressed and felt in this world, it's unholy because it's disconnected from its source. So this is how the whole concept of evil exists. It exists because of the breaking of the vessels. All sin, all temptation, all potential for sin, all potential for darkness and negativity comes from the breaking of the vessels. This is basically what we typically talk about when we talk about the breaking of the vessels. So I think up to now was sort of introduction. And today, hopefully from here on, hopefully we can explore a little further and try to explain what this means further. I'm just gonna open up the floor. If anybody wants to make a comment, just that I understand, just to make sure that I'm talking, just to make sure we're on the same page, if you see what I'm saying. If anybody wants, if I said anything that doesn't make sense to you, let me know, and then I know how to clarify. Yes, Mark.
God created the vessels in order for them to break?
Yes. First, the vessels God creates vessels that are going to break, and this is all part of the plan. Short answer is yes. We'll elaborate. This is all part of the plan. It has to happen this way. One of the reasons why it has to happen this way is if you want to create evil, you have to create the fall and the break. So let me just elaborate for a moment, and then we'll continue. So typically, the way the Kabbalah says, the way you move through it, typically the Kabbalah explains that there's a concept called Seder Hishtalshalut. Seder Hishtalshalut means order. Literally, it's the order of the chain. And from the Kabbalistic perspective, there's an evolution of worlds, and there's the higher world to the lower world, and there's 4 worlds, and within every world there are many levels, and there are many spherot within 10 spherot within each world, etc., etc. What they all have in common, the realm of holiness, is that everything is a chain. And if you have a chain, then even if you're the lowest rung of the chain, you're connected to the highest rung of the chain. So if you start out with holiness, no matter how low you go on the rung, you're still going to feel connected to your source, no matter how far the chain goes. So there's not going to be unholiness because you're still connected to your source. So to have a phenomenon that's disconnected from its source, you have to have a break. And the break is the shattered vessels. That's one of the reasons why it was created in a way that the vessels should break. So you should have a disconnect between the energy and its source, the vessel and its source, disconnect between creation and creator, which will allow for free choice and allow for negativity, which then gives meaning to existence. Okay, that's the philosophical idea. Let's look inward. Let's look at the person for a moment. Let's see where this parallels within the person. So there are various ways to see this. Typically, we talk about the animal soul. We're going to go even before that. Let's think about the place of a person that is order and the place within the person that is chaos. So order within person. So again, let's just, if you want to think about the concept of holiness is synonymous with order, with the world of order. So the world of Atzilut, the highest spiritual world, is considered the world of tikkun, the world of order. So another way of saying order is holiness. One more introduction, why not? One more introduction. Another thing, I say this all the time, I'll say it again, most of you heard this from me before. Another concept that this world of, the concept of order and chaos does for us, it also helps us explain why it seems that unholiness, in many cases, is much more powerful than holiness. Right? I always say within myself, I have a desire to do good, I have a desire to do bad, I have a destructive force, I have a constructive force. Often when I look at myself, I will see that my destructive force is more powerful than my constructive force. The evil inclination seems stronger than the holy inclination. How does this work and why does this happen? According to the Kabbalah, it's very clear, because the negativity comes from the world of chaos. And the world of chaos, the energy is much more powerful. Because it's so powerful, it led to the break. But the energy of the world of chaos is much more powerful. No surprise then that unholiness has much more energy. Holiness has other properties that help it survive, but it's not necessarily so powerful. What the holiness has, it has intelligence. And if you just want to, if you just want to think of a metaphor, if you want to just paint a picture in your mind. So you have a person in the field, plowing the field with an ox. Who's stronger? The ox is stronger. Who's smarter? The person is smarter. So the same thing is within the negative inclination within the human soul and the positive inclination within the human soul. What's stronger? The negative. What's smarter is the positive. I'm going to say it one more way, and then we're going to go to what I wanted to talk about earlier. What's stronger within yourself, your mind or your heart? Okay, think about this for a second. What's stronger, your mind or your heart? So let's say your mind tells you that something is good for you, and then your heart tells you that something is good for you. Which one is stronger? So I'll speak for myself. My heart tells me chocolate cake is good. It's very powerful. My mind tells me broccoli is good. I don't know. It's not as powerful. Okay? So in anything in life, there's a tremendous tension between the heart and the mind. When the heart tells you something, you feel like it's like a bull raging, trying to reach what it wants. The mind is much more chilled. It's much more calm. It tells you this is right, this is wrong, nothing to get excited about. But the passion is within the heart. So one way to think about the chaos and order within the person is to think about the mind and the heart. Now, the thing with the heart is that the heart is much more powerful. The heart has a lot of energy. Emotion has a lot more energy. However, if somebody follows just their emotion, what's going to happen is often they're going to break, right? Just like the shattering of the vessels. You have a person who follows their emotion completely, and the emotion is not channeled by the mind, they're going to crash. Because every day they're chasing something else, they're going to crash. There's going to be no constructive growth in their life. So here you have it. This balance between mind and heart is sort of the connection between, sort of a reflection of the world of chaos and the world of order. That's just general. But I want to speak more specific. The Kabbalah differentiates between two types of emotion. You don't need the Kabbalah. You could see it within yourself. There are some emotions that derive from the mind. In other words, I understand something to be good. I have that realization. Sometimes I need meditation, but sometimes it comes natural. So I understand something to be good. And because I understand something to be good, therefore I want it. So somebody explained to me that if I go to school and I get an education, I'm going to be able to live a more meaningful life. So therefore I understand that. You explained it to me over time. I understand it. That's what I want to do. So emotion that is born from the mind. According to the Kabbalah, we talked about the 7 sefirot last week. The 7 sefirot are the children, and the parents is the intelligence which gives birth to the emotional, to the emotions. So in other words, you have to have an awareness, intellectual awareness. I understand this to be good. And because I understand this to be good, therefore I go and I do it. Therefore I have the child of the awareness, the child of the meditation, the child of the understanding is the emotion. And that's one class of emotions. We call it midot, emotions that derive from the mind. Now, you can okay, so that's one. Now there are another set of emotions that don't derive from the mind. They're actually much deeper than the mind. They're much more primal. I want something. Why do I want it? There's no reason. This is just who I am. This is what I want. Those emotions actually precede the mind. They come from a deeper source within the person than the mind. Okay. Now let's think about a question. If you have somebody who's very passionate, could you try to reason with them? Could you try to convince them that what they feel is not maybe wrong for them or not constructive, or try to channel their emotion to another direction? Well, if it's an emotion that derives from the mind, then it's much easier to channel, right? Because you only want this because you understand A, and therefore you think that leads to an emotional conclusion. If A is good, therefore I want to do A. But then if I can explain to you that A is not that great, then your emotion will change as well. So I could reason with emotions that derive from the mind. But I cannot reason. It's much more harder to reason with the emotions that are more primal, with the emotions that precede the mind. I just feel this way because that's who I am, not because I understand something. Says the Kabbalah, these two levels of emotion are like the emotion of chaos and the emotion of order, the world of chaos and the world of order. The emotions that are so powerful that you can't control, that's the forces of Tayu, of chaos. They're very powerful. They're very good. They could be very good, but they can also be destructive. The emotions that derive from the mind, they're much more orderly. They're not as powerful, but they're more orderly. They will allow you to live a constructive life. Now, the purpose of holiness is somehow to rein in the emotion and direct the emotion and channel the emotion, and somehow to fuse the mind and the heart, somehow to fuse the world of chaos and the world of order. If I can fuse them both, I have the best of both worlds. I'm just going to finish with one more metaphor, and then we'll open up for questions, and then we'll go and we'll read the Kabbalistic interpretation here of one of the applications of this. So I want to conclude this idea, just for a metaphor. The mind is like, I like to say the mind is like the steering wheel and the heart is like the engine. Now, if you have a beautiful car, you have a sports car, and you have the best engine in the world, but you don't have a steering wheel, what's going to happen? You're going to crash into the wall. Why? Because you're so passionate, you have so much energy, but you can't direct yourself. So where do you end up? You end up in a crash. On the other hand, if you can have the best steering wheel, but you don't have any engine, you have no passion, you have all the right ideas. Some people are very good at ideas, but they can't get themselves to do it. So what happens is, that's when you have just order and just chaos. the purpose of creation is that we fuse the two. That now the world of order corrects and collects the energy of the world of chaos and uses that energy for holiness. So somehow I get my steering wheel to control my engine. And if I can do that, then I'm living in inner harmony. Otherwise, there's inner chaos. Now, like I said, this is just by very general. There's so many ways to think about this. And hopefully we'll do a little bit of this and a little bit of the application today. If not today, we'll do a little bit more tomorrow. But the good news is there's much more to learn, even on this topic. So God will give us many years, many long years, healthy years, so we can continue studying the Torah and getting down to the roots of what's happening here. So I'm just going to open up the floor if anybody has a question before we move on.
Rabbi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. It just seems that God gave us a formula. I mean, in the shattering of the vessel, it seems like every time something great and new that we understand happens, the old forms have to be shattered in order for the new to take form. And it's a process that you see with babies. Their world changes and it's explosive and they become sort of new people. And so it's like the saying, as above, so below, and for in God's image. This is the process that we are following. The energy shatters the form, and then we have to regroup.
Agreed.
That's just on a psychological level.
Absolutely. In other words, if you're coming from the Kabbalistic perspective and when you see chaos, how do you respond to chaos? You say the purpose of chaos is to build after the chaos. The purpose of chaos is to create order after the chaos. I'm going to elaborate upon that point. Excellent point. Okay. Unless somebody else wants to share, I'm going to continue. Okay. Okay, one more application before we go to the Hasidic discourse that I wanted to read a few minutes of. One more application is, by the way, I'm going to talk about education for a moment, but you see this with children. We mentioned on Sunday as well. Children's emotions are very powerful. When they love completely. When they hate, they cry completely. They love you completely 1 minute, the next minute they hate you completely. And that's a wonderful thing. That's why they're so happy and they're so living in the moment. It's a wonderful thing. But you have to grow up. What do I mean you have to grow up? As an adult, your emotions have to be more sophisticated. Sophisticated means you have to be able to see not black and white, but complexity, right? So a child, something bad happens to the child. They got a scratch. So someone told them something. So they cry as if the world is over. And as the adult, you tell the teenager, listen, your world is not over. You didn't even start life yet, right? So in other words, from a child's perspective, every emotion is absolute and complete. An adult's emotion, the more mature the adult is, the more order there is in the world of chaos. What happens is even something bad happens to me, I'm upset, but I'm not completely upset because I have the maturity of the mind to understand that, yeah, something bad happened, but there could be a detail that's good, right? I lost this opportunity. Maybe a new opportunity would open. I go to the dentist. I'm not happy that it hurts, but I'm happy that now I'm going to have healthy teeth. And the contrary also works. When something good happens, a child, you give them a candy, they're in love with you forever, or not forever, intensely. An adult, you give me something good, I say, look, it's nice here. Tomorrow it's going to be gone. And a mature emotion has to be able to see complexity. A child's emotion does not see any complexity at all because the child's emotion is much more raw and pure and beautiful. But that you can't sort of build a mature life just with the emotion of a child. You have to move from the chaos to the order. In other words, in your life as well, there are primal emotions, which are the world of chaos, and they're good, but you can't just live based on that. You have to develop the emotion that's much more the world of order, which is directed by your mind. Okay, now that we introduce children, one more point. You have a child, and when the child is making trouble, the teenager is turning your life upside down. So the natural result is to say, this is negativity, this is chaos, this is terrible. But the Kabbalistic perspective is, this is not chaos. What this is the world of chaos. The world of chaos means this child has a tremendous amount of energy. And because the child has so much energy and potential, therefore the child is not able to contain it. And therefore it's expressing itself in a negative way. Your job is to channel that energy to the good. If you can, then ultimately, probably the troublemaker in your class is going to achieve more than the kid sitting and behaving and sitting straight. Because the world of chaos is much more powerful than the world of order. And this leads us to where I want to go, which is the story of the biblical story of Yaakov and Esav. Isaac has twins, Yaakov and Esav. Yaakov is wholesome, complete, a nice guy. He respects his mother. He is very obedient, wonderful child, straight A child. Esav is the opposite. Father loves Esav, and Esav, what does he do with his time? He's a hunter. He's running around the field. He can't sit still. Now, the mother loves Jacob, of course. We know that. Jacob is the father of the Jewish people. Jacob is the world of order. But what's strange is the father, Isaac, loves Esav. He loves the kid that can't sit straight, and the kid that is a hunter. And in Jewish culture, the hunter represents he likes the there's a certain degree of cruelty involved. There's a certain degree of sport that is the opposite of order and civilization. And yet the father loves Esav. Why does the father love Esav? The father is the most spiritual in some sense of all the patriarchs. Why does he love Esav? So the Kabbalistic answer is very simple. When he sees Esav, he doesn't see Esav. He doesn't see the negative expression of Esav's chaos. He sees the chaos as tremendous potential that has to be channeled and that has to be guided. And in that sense, Isaac loves his child and almost shows favoritism to his child because he wants to direct the energy of the world of chaos. Doesn't really work out that way completely, but that's another story. So I'm going to say one more thing from the Hasidic discourse, and then maybe we'll open it for questions and call it a day. One more story is like this. There's an epic story in the Torah where after many years of distance, Jacob gets ready to meet his brother Esav, because if you know the story, Jacob steals the blessings, and Esav wants to kill him for that. They want to meet up, and Jacob is heading to Esav to meet up. So if you read the biblical story, Jacob prepares for the meeting, and he does many things to prepare for this meeting. But one of the things that he does is he divides his camp into two. The Torah says, "Vayachatz es am asher ito." He divides his camp into two. Why does he divide his camp into two? So the simple understanding is that he hopes that if Esav attacks one camp, the other camp will be able to escape and survive. So the simple story is that the dividing of the camp is a tactical thing. In other words, he's preparing for war, and in war, you want to divide your camp. That is the conventional understanding of this story. There's a Kabbalistic understanding, and that's what we're going to focus on now. And there's a whole, like I said, we don't have time to read the whole discourse inside, but there is a deep Kabbalistic concept here. And what the Kabbalah says is like this. The Kabbalah says that Esav comes from the world of chaos, Jacob comes from the world of order, and Jacob is trying to connect to the energy of Esav to be able to channel Esav's energy and be able to sort of cooperate with Esav to build the Jewish people. It wasn't meant to be for whatever reason, but that's the goal. So therefore, Jacob divides his camp into two, because according to the Kabbalah, the world of chaos divides into two. And this is interesting. The world of order, which is the world of holiness, divides into three, which is why the number 3 is so important in Judaism. When we praise God, we say Kadosh, 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 holy, holy, holy. We typically do things in sets of 3, because the Kabbalah says that holiness is divided in 3. Now, we discussed the 10 Sfirot, and if you think about it, the 10 Sfirot is, if you look at the different charts, there's various ways of thinking about 10 Sfirot. The two most common is that it's linear, starts from the top and goes down. The other most common is, the next most common is that it's actually divided into 3 columns. There's the right column, the left column, the center column. And that's how you see the form of a person. You have right side, left side, and center, as we discussed last week. So the Kabbalah explains that when you have 3 columns, you're talking about holiness, you're not talking about unholiness. What do I mean? I mean that the world of chaos is extreme. And that's why it's 2 columns. It's either right, it's either left. It either loves you or hates you. If it loves you completely and it doesn't see any fault in you. If it hates you completely. There's no complexity. Because every emotion is so powerful, it does not make space for the other emotion. It cannot coexist with any other emotion, with any other feeling. So like I said, think about it as if you have a group of people that want to achieve something, and everybody is strong-minded, and nobody wants to compromise, and everybody wants to do it exactly the way they see it. What's going to happen is there's going to be an explosion. Why? Not because people are not passionate enough, because people are too passionate. They're too involved in their own perspective. Holiness is, there's a third column. The third column of holiness merges the right and the left. And that's where the sort of the secret of holiness lies. The ability to have a little bit of some kindness, but some discipline. The ability to channel the emotion, to have to see complexity. I see you causing me pain, but I see deep down you're in pain too. So in other words, to be able to actually fuse both extremes is something in the realm of holiness. That's one idea. And therefore, anytime you can sort of have a balancing of opposing approaches, you are in the realm of holiness. You have to be able to balance. And I'm going to say just one more application of this, and then we call it a day. The other application is that according to the Kabbalah, the emotional state of the human being is complex. On one hand, we have to have this great desire to escape the world, to escape the gravitational pull of the physical and become close to the spiritual. That's why we pray. That's why we close our eyes when we say the Shema. We're trying to escape the physical. On the other hand, we're supposed to cultivate what we call that ratzo, running. On the other hand, we're supposed to cultivate the opposite feeling as well, which is shuv, which is return. Because I know I want to come close to God, but God wants me here on this earth. So I have to run or I have to return. How do I do both simultaneously? Well, if I'm not in the world of holiness, it's very hard to do. I can't have both opposing feelings at once. But the idea of holiness, because it's the idea of tikkun, order, I can see complexity. I could mix emotions together. Therefore, I'm able to have both emotions, not just two extremes. When you have two extremes, you're either one or the other. If you divide into three, which is holiness, then the third column, the middle, has a little bit of both. And therefore, simultaneously, I could do both. I could want to be in heaven, yet be on earth in the same time. And that's a skill that holiness possesses. That's a skill that the world of order possesses. And again, this is, in short, sort of the more spiritual side of the concept of the world of chaos and the world of order. And hopefully tomorrow, we'll do one more class on correcting the broken vessels, what we call refining of the sparks. And that will be about how do I take all that chaos in my life and reconnect it to its source within holiness, within God.